I still remember that night vividly, the night my life changed forever. Back then, I was just an 8-year-old girl, curled up in the back seat of an old car, clutching the stuffed bear I had never been apart from. The night sky was calm, a deep blue streaked with faint orange glows from the streetlights. I didn't feel uneasy because our destination was Grandma Eleanor's house, a place where I always felt safe. Grandma always welcomed me with a gentle smile, the warm scent of freshly baked cookies, and comforting hugs. Every visit to her house was special, because I knew she would tell me wonderful stories and let me touch her treasured collection of old books, something only I was allowed to do. But this time, things were different. The car came to a stop on the gravel road in front of her porch. I waited for my mother to turn and look at me, but she just sat there, gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. Her face wasn't angry, nor was it sad, just cold in a way I couldn't understand. My father said nothing, staring straight ahead, avoiding my gaze as if my very presence made him uncomfortable. Finally, my mother turned around, her voice so quiet that I almost didn't hear it. "We just need a little time to sort things out, Allison. Be a good girl and stay with Grandma for a while, okay?" No further explanations, no promises of when they would return, not even a hug. I nodded, trying to be obedient, just like she expected. I still didn't realize something was wrong. I still believed that tomorrow or the day after they would come back for me. But as I stepped out of the car, dragging my small backpack with a few hastily packed clothes, Grandma Eleanor was already standing at the door, her eyes filled with sadness but still as gentle as ever. I turned back one last time. "Mom." The car was already pulling away. No wave goodbye. No one looked back. I ran after it for a few steps, my chest tightening as the taillights faded and disappeared down the road. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because I hadn't yet understood that I had just been abandoned. Grandma Eleanor wrapped me in her arms, gently patting my back as if to reassure me. She didn't ask any questions, she simply led me inside, where the familiar scent of chamomile tea lingered in the air. She made me my favorite dinner, chicken noodle soup, but I just sat there staring at it, unable to take a bite. That night she read me a bedtime story, the same one I had heard countless times but still asked her to read again. Her voice was slow and soothing, but I couldn't focus. When the lights went out, I curled up in the warm bed, burying my face into my stuffed bear, waiting for the familiar sound of a car pulling up outside. But the only sound outside was the wind. The next day I sat by the window, eyes fixed on the road in front of the house. I waited. 1 hour, 2 hours, the whole day. No one came. I kept waiting. A week passed. Every afternoon I sat there, watching every car that drove by. My heart leaped at the sound of an engine, only to sink again when I realized it was a stranger. 2 months. My parents still hadn't come back. When my classmates talked about their families, I just smiled and said nothing. I stopped asking Grandma Eleanor when they would return because I had begun to understand. They weren't coming back. But no matter how much I understood it logically, emotions were different. Every night, when the house grew silent, I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to stifle the quiet sobs that caught in my throat. I didn't want Grandma to hear, didn't want her to worry. But on some nights, she still came into my room, sitting at the edge of my bed, her wrinkled hand gently rubbing my back. "It's not your fault, Allison," she whispered. "Some people aren't ready to be parents, but that has nothing to do with you." I wanted to believe her, I truly did. But how could I when the truth kept haunting me, when the same question kept repeating in my mind? Why didn't they choose me? Grandma Eleanor was never one for flowery words or grand gestures of affection. But she loved me in her own way, with patience, with warm meals placed on the table every day, with simple yet profound lessons, and most of all, by never mentioning those who had abandoned me. Her house was small, nothing like the lavish mansions I had seen in magazines, but it was always warm. She had an old Toyota that she still drove, even though she could easily afford a newer one. The house had bookshelves stretching to the ceiling, filled with the old books she cherished. Every morning, I would see her reading the financial section of the newspaper, sometimes nodding in approval at an article, sometimes furrowing her brows in thought. I didn't understand the numbers she read, but I knew that whenever she closed the paper and looked at me, her eyes always held pride. "Why do you like reading that stuff?" I once asked on a quiet morning, absent-mindedly stirring my cereal. She set her tea down, the corners of her lips curling slightly. "Because knowledge is power, Allison, and when you learn how to make money work for you, you'll never have to depend on anyone." At the time, I simply nodded, not fully grasping the weight of her words. But I didn't know then that the lessons she taught me that day would stay with me for the rest of my life. Under Grandma Eleanor's care, I slowly adapted to my new life. I stopped looking out the window every day, no longer waiting for a strange car to appear. She taught me how to bake cookies, how to tend to the small flower garden behind the house, how to think logically instead of letting emotions take control. And most importantly, she never once let me feel unloved. She was also the first to recognize my love for science. One day, when I was 9, she walked into the kitchen and found me experimenting with something. I had mixed baking soda and vinegar in a cup, eagerly watching as the bubbles fizzed over the rim. "Well," she said, crossing her arms as she observed, "looks like we have a scientist in the house." I looked up, my cheeks flushing slightly with embarrassment. "I was just trying something." She smiled. "Experimenting is the best way to learn, Allison. But if you want to create something bigger, perhaps we should do it the right way." The next day, she took me to a bookstore that specialized in children's science books and let me pick out anything I wanted. I chose a book about simple chemical reactions and a small experiment kit. She never said no when I asked for more books, and she never let me believe that anything was impossible. By the time I was 13, I had worked on a project about bacteria and how they reacted to their environment. I spent hours researching, experimenting, and recording results. When the state science fair approached, I nearly gave up, afraid that I wasn't good enough. But Grandma Eleanor wouldn't let me quit. "Allison, success isn't about never failing," she said, looking at me firmly. "It's about continuing even when you feel like giving up." Her words kept me standing. I didn't just participate in the competition, I won first place. As I stepped onto the stage to receive my trophy, I searched for her in the crowd. And when I saw her standing in the back row, her eyes filled with pride, I knew that every effort had been worth it. The years that followed passed peacefully, but Grandma Eleanor never stopped preparing me for my future. On my 18th birthday, she arranged a small dinner at our favorite restaurant. It wasn't anything extravagant, just my closest friends, a few old teachers, and people she considered family. After everyone had left, she handed me a small velvet box. "For you," she said, her voice warm. I opened the box and found a delicate necklace with a tiny key pendant hanging from it. "What does this key open?" I asked, running my fingers over its smooth surface. She didn't answer right away, just smiled. "You'll understand someday." I didn't press further. I knew she always had a reason for everything she did. At the time, I didn't know that this would be the last gift she ever gave me. I didn't know that just 3 months later, I would receive a phone call that changed everything. And I certainly didn't know that this tiny key would open the biggest door of my life. I got the call on a quiet afternoon in the middle of the month. When the hospital's number appeared on my screen, I knew something was wrong. My hands turned cold as I picked up, and when the voice on the other end spoke, calm, polite yet urgent, I knew my life would never be the same again. Grandma Eleanor was gone. A sudden heart attack. She hadn't had time to call anyone, hadn't left any final words. The nurse said it had happened quickly, but that did nothing to ease the pain crushing my chest. I hadn't gotten to say goodbye. I hadn't gotten to hold her one last time. I hadn't told her how much I loved her. The days that followed felt like a blur. I ate because I knew she wouldn't want me to fall apart. I arranged everything, handled the funeral, greeted the guests, because that's what she would have wanted. But inside, I felt hollow. The house was cold now, missing her voice, missing the warmth in her eyes whenever she looked at me. The funeral took place on a gray, somber day, as if the sky itself mourned her loss. The church was packed. Former students of hers traveled from all over, some now doctors, engineers, teachers, all saying that she had changed their lives. I sat in the front row, my heart tightening as I listened to each story about her kindness and wisdom. And just when I started to feel like she was still here with me, just when I began to find comfort in the beautiful memories of her, they appeared. My parents. I sensed their presence before I saw them. My whole body tensed, my breath caught in my throat. Then I turned my head, and at the far end of the church, they were walking in. My mother looked different. Her hair now streaked with gray, her face no longer holding the youthful look I remembered. My father had gained weight, but he still carried himself with the same self-assured stance. Except today, he wore a mask of feigned sorrow. They walked toward the front row, as if they had the right to stand there, as if their presence was about genuine grief for Eleanor rather than for show. My chest tightened. 10 years. 10 years without a single word. No letters, no phone calls. Yet now, with Grandma Eleanor gone, they returned. My mother spoke first. "Ellison." Her voice was gentle, as if nothing had ever happened. "We came as soon as we heard. Your grandmother was a wonderful woman. I'm truly sorry for your loss." I stared at her, saying nothing. A part of me wanted to scream, to ask them why they were only appearing now, why, when I needed them the most, they weren't there. But I simply clenched my fists, holding on to my composure. My father let out a deep sigh, feigning sadness. "This has been so hard. I know you're grieving, sweetheart. But don't worry. You're not alone anymore. You're coming home with us." I felt the blood in my veins turn cold. "Home," I repeated, my voice sharp. My mother nodded, reaching out as if to take my hand, but I took a step back. "You're still not 18. You're still our daughter. Now that Eleanor is gone, you need family by your side." I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. I could feel the weight of the stairs around us, but I didn't care. I looked at them, their eyes filled with forced patience, but I wasn't the naive 8-year-old anymore. I knew they weren't here for me. They were here for Eleanor's wealth. I met my father's gaze directly. "Are you here for me, or for Grandma's money?" Silence. I saw my mother blink, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face, but she masked it quickly. My father leaned forward, his voice firm. "Of course we're here for you, Allison. We're family. What are you thinking?" A real family wouldn't have abandoned their child without a word. A real family wouldn't wait until there was something to gain before reappearing. I took a deep breath, my voice steadier than ever. "I'm not going anywhere." My mother's expression darkened. "Allison, don't be stubborn. We are your parents." "No," I said, locking eyes with them. "The only family I had is gone." The truth of that statement lodged itself in my throat, but I didn't cry. Because at that moment, I realized I no longer expected anything from them. They had left me once, and I would never give them the chance to do it again. The tension in the law office's conference room was suffocating. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Sitting at the head of the table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Across from me, a middle-aged man in a neatly pressed gray suit meticulously arranged the documents in front of him. Eleanor's attorney. I didn't know what to expect. A part of me felt empty, another part was terrified. But more than anything, I just wanted this to be over so I could leave. My parents sat across from me, wearing their usual expressions of forced patience. But I saw the flicker of anticipation in their eyes. They weren't here for me. They were here for what Eleanor had left behind. The attorney cleared his throat, turned a page, and looked at me directly. "Allison, my name is Richard Carter, your grandmother's legal representative. I am here to read her final will." I nodded, keeping my face unreadable. He picked up the document and began reading. I, Eleanor Grace Montgomery, being of sound mind and acting of my own free will, hereby declare this document as my final testament. My chest tightened as his voice echoed in the room. The will detailed various charitable donations Eleanor had arranged, small gifts to her close friends. But when he reached the most significant part, his voice slowed. All properties, investment holdings, bank accounts, and personal assets, totaling an estimated value of $52 million, are to be left entirely to my granddaughter, Allison Grace Montgomery. The room went silent. My parents froze. My mother reacted first. She shot up from her chair, her eyes wide with panic. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake." My father narrowed his eyes, his voice turning rigid. "This is not how things were supposed to go. We are her children. We have a right to this inheritance." Attorney Carter remained unfazed by their reaction. He calmly slid a folder toward them. "I'm afraid neither of you have any legal claim to Eleanor's estate." He pointed to a document on top. 10 years ago, you both signed this, relinquishing all legal guardianship over Allison. Do you remember?" My mother's face went pale. "That was just paperwork. We didn't mean—" The attorney shook his head. "This is a legally binding document. Once you signed it, you forfeited any rights over Allison, including any claim to her inheritance." I looked at them, waiting for a glimmer of regret, a sign that they realized their mistake. But all I saw was anger and desperation as their plan unraveled before them. My father clenched his jaw. "She must have been manipulated. There's no way she would leave everything to a child like that." Attorney Carter remained composed. "Eleanor was an extremely intelligent and meticulous woman. Before her passing, she ensured that this will was legally verified by multiple witnesses and attorneys. No one manipulated her." My mother's hands clenched, her voice trembling. "We are her family. We deserve at least a portion." "No," I cut in, my voice firmer than ever. They turned to me, shock and frustration evident on their faces. I met their gaze, my tone calm but sharp. Family is the people who stand by you when you need them the most. The ones who love you unconditionally. The ones who raise you, teach you, and hold you when you're hurting. I took a deep breath, gripping the small key hanging around my neck. The last gift from Grandma Eleanor. "You abandoned me a long time ago, and now I'm doing the same to you." My mother's eyes burned with fury. "Allison, you don't understand. If you don't share with us, there will be consequences." I laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Consequences? Do you think I'm afraid? You taught me an important lesson. I don't need anyone who only wants me for what I can give them." My father slammed his hand against the table. "You'll regret this." Attorney Carter interjected before I could respond. "You have the right to contest the will if you wish, but I warn you, everything is legally sound. There are no loopholes to exploit." Their faces twisted with frustration. I knew they realized they had lost. Finally, my mother stood, her expression icy. "Mark my words, Allison. You may have all the money, but you will never have a real family." I looked at her, feeling a wave of emotion rise in my chest, but it wasn't pain or fear. It was relief. I stood, adjusting the necklace around my neck, and replied steadily, "I had a real family, and you were never a part of it." Then I turned and walked away, never looking back, because I knew this was the last time I would ever have to face them. I thought everything was over after the reading of the will, but I had underestimated their greed. A few weeks later, I received a call from attorney Richard Carter, informing me that my parents had filed a lawsuit to contest the inheritance. They claimed that Eleanor had been manipulated into writing the will, that she had been mentally unfit in her final years, and that an 18-year-old like me was incapable of managing such a large estate. I wasn't surprised. I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. But I also knew that Eleanor had prepared for everything. We had all the necessary paperwork, medical records proving she had been fully competent when drafting the will. Every asset had been legally arranged and transferred. There was no loophole for them to exploit. The case was quickly dismissed. I assumed that after their failure in court, they would finally give up. I was wrong. That day, I was at Montgomery Enterprises, the investment firm Eleanor had founded, when the front desk receptionist paged me over the intercom. "Miss Allison, there are 2 individuals downstairs claiming to be your parents. They are demanding to see you immediately." I sighed, setting down my pen and leaning back in my chair. I was exhausted by this endless cat-and-mouse game. "I'll be down." As I stepped out of the elevator, my resolve hardened. I was no longer the 8-year-old girl crying on a porch. My parents stood in the middle of the grand lobby, drawing the attention of employees and clients alike. My mother had her arms crossed, impatience written all over her face, while my father stood tense beside her. The moment they saw me, they immediately approached. "Allison," my mother spoke first, her voice still carrying that same false sweetness. "We need to talk." I kept my distance, folding my arms. "What is there left to say?" My father stepped forward, his tone deepening. "We can't let things end like this. You know that." I let out a quiet chuckle, devoid of warmth. "End like what? The way you abandoned me 10 years ago without a second thought?" My mother's jaw tightened. "Don't speak like that, Allison. I know you're upset, but this isn't just about the past. This is about family, about what's rightfully ours." I raised an eyebrow. "Ours? What right do you think you have to anything?" I looked straight at them, my voice cold and unwavering. "You didn't come back for me. You came back for the money." My mother blinked but didn't deny it. My father took a slow breath, then leaned in slightly, his voice lowering into something darker. "If you don't cooperate, we'll have to take more drastic measures." I tilted my head. "Drastic measures?" My father clenched his fists. "We could make this public. The media would love a story about an 18-year-old stealing her parents' inheritance." I couldn't help but laugh. "Are you threatening me?" I crossed my arms, my gaze unwavering. "Go ahead, tell your story to the press." I took a step closer, lowering my voice but making sure every word carried weight. "Tell them how you abandoned your 8-year-old daughter without a word of explanation." My parents stiffened. "Tell them how you tried to deceive your own mother to take her fortune." My mother glared at me, but I wasn't finished. "Tell them how, for 10 years, you never once called, never once asked if I was alive or dead. And then, when Eleanor passed away, you came back, hoping to take what was never yours." Silence engulfed them. I saw it in their eyes, the fear. Not fear of me, but fear of the truth being exposed. They knew that if this story came to light, they would have no escape. Finally, my father was the first to turn away. His jaw tightened, and he muttered something under his breath that I couldn't make out. My mother lingered for a few seconds longer, as if hoping I would change my mind. But when she saw that I wouldn't waver, she lowered her voice. "Remember this, Allison. You may have the money, but you will never have a real family." I held her gaze, my resolve unshaken. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." She pressed her lips together, then turned and walked away with my father. I stood still, watching them leave the building. This time for good. I didn't feel heartbroken. I didn't feel regret. For 10 years I had waited for a family, but now I understood. I had never lost one. I had Eleanor, and that was all I ever needed. I sat in Eleanor's old office, a room I hadn't dared to step into since the day she was gone. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the dark wooden desk. Everything remained untouched. The stacks of neatly arranged financial books, the white porcelain teacup resting on the shelf, and the framed portrait of her hanging on the wall, her sharp yet kind eyes watching over me. Before me was a small wooden box, a sealed envelope resting on top. My hands trembled as I opened it. "To my dearest granddaughter, Allison." Her voice seemed to echo in every word. "If you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. That breaks my heart, because I never wanted you to feel alone. But remember, even though I am no longer in this world, I will always be watching over you, in every step you take. The handwriting was slightly shaky, but still precise. I ran my fingers over the ink as if somehow she was still here with me. You have always wondered why your parents left you, and I know that question has hurt you deeply, but the truth is, they didn't just leave you. They tried to take everything I had. When they realized I wouldn't be deceived, they chose to walk away. But I have never regretted keeping you. You were the greatest gift they unknowingly left behind. I clutched the letter, my heart aching. Allison, I'm not just leaving you wealth, I am leaving you a legacy. I spent years building Hope Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping abandoned children just like you once were. I quietly used my resources to give opportunities to those who had no one to protect them. And now, I want you to continue this work. I blinked, my throat tightening. I know you have the strength to do this. You have always been resilient, intelligent, and kind-hearted. Do not let the past hold you back. Use what I have left you to change the world in whatever way you see fit. At the bottom, her final words stood alone. I have always believed in you, and I love you forever. Tears fell silently onto the paper. I spent the following weeks learning everything I could about the Hope Foundation. The organization's office was in a modest building Eleanor had purchased years ago. Inside, I met the dedicated staff who had worked alongside her. People passionate about helping children in need. One of them, Linda, a woman in her 50s with streaks of silver in her hair, approached and took my hand. Sweetheart, Eleanor always said that one day you would come here. She smiled warmly. She believed you were the only one who could continue what she started. I looked around. The walls filled with photos of smiling children, files documenting lives that had been changed, letters from those who had once been orphans but now had a future. I took a deep breath. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Linda shook her head. You're here. That's already a great start. And I decided I would make it happen. Alongside managing the charity, I also took over Montgomery Investments, the firm Eleanor had built over the years. Initially, the board of directors doubted me, a young woman with no prior financial experience, but I refused to let them underestimate me. I spent hours studying, attending every meeting, learning from the best in the company. I remembered Eleanor's words, knowledge is power, and I used that power to prove I was worthy of the role. 1 year later, as I stood before the board, presenting my plan to expand the firm's investments into more social impact projects, I saw something new in their eyes. Respect. I was no longer just an heiress. I had become a leader. I could have bought anything, but I kept Eleanor's old Toyota. It sat in the garage, covered in a thin layer of dust, but I never had the heart to sell it. Because it wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of the values she had taught me. To live simply, work hard, and always help those around me. I wasn't just the inheritor of Eleanor's fortune. I was the keeper of her ideals. I am not just her heir. I am her legacy. Life isn't always fair, but how we face adversity defines who we become. Allison was abandoned, she was hurt, but she refused to let her past define her. Instead of being consumed by betrayal, she rose above it, turning her pain into purpose. A true legacy isn't measured by wealth, but by the impact we leave on the world. By continuing Eleanor's mission, Allison didn't just find her calling. She proved that we are not defined by what we have lost, but by what we choose to build. What do you think of Allison's journey? Did she make the right choice in standing up to her parents' greed? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about family and life. I grew up in a family where all the attention was focused on Madison, my older sister. If she was the shining sun, then I was just a faint shadow, drifting at the edge of the light. I can't remember the last time my parents truly looked at me with pride, but I remember very clearly the moments they cherished Madison, like a precious gem. As a child, I tried so hard to be seen. I participated in every school competition, from debate to science fairs, hoping that one day my parents would look at me the way they looked at Madison. But no matter how much I tried, The result was always the same. I still remember one evening when I was 12. It was the night of the school's science fair awards. I had spent weeks building a smart eco-house model, a project that had cost me many sleepless nights to complete. When they called my name for first place, I could hardly believe my ears. In my hands were a certificate and a gleaming medal, and my heart was filled with hope. When I got home, Madison was sitting on the sofa, beaming as she talked about the dance routine she had just performed at her school's dress rehearsal. Everyone clapped so loudly, Mom. The teacher even said I have a natural talent, Madison said excitedly, her golden hair catching the soft glow of the table lamp beside her. I waited. I waited for the moment Mom would turn to me, see the medal in my hands, and praise me. But instead, she simply ruffled Madison's hair and said proudly, "You really have an artistic gift, sweetheart." I stood there, gripping my certificate tightly, feeling a suffocating weight in my chest. When I finally spoke up, "Mom, I won first place at the science fair today." She barely glanced at the medal before giving me a small smile. "That's nice, honey. Was the competition hard?" I fell silent. Dad sat in his armchair, eyes still glued to his newspaper, not even bothering to look up. No one asked about my project. No one wanted to know how much effort I had put into it. They just continued basking in Madison's glow. That night, I lay in bed, the cold medal in my hand, tears rolling down my cheeks. I couldn't understand why I was never enough. Years passed, and I learned to accept my place in the family. I stopped trying to get their attention and instead threw myself into academics. If I couldn't be loved, at least I could be the best in my field. And then I met Nathan. Nathan was the first person who made me feel like I truly existed. He didn't just listen, he remembered the smallest details about me, the things my parents had never cared about. Nathan knew I liked drinking chamomile tea at night, knew I loved capturing candid moments with my camera, knew I had a notebook where I wrote down my strange dreams. We started dating when I was 20. Being with Nathan felt like stepping out of Madison's shadow. For the first time in my life, I was loved without having to prove my worth. But of course, Madison wouldn't let that be. I still remember the night Nathan first came over for dinner with my family. Mom brought out her best dinnerware, and Dad poured drinks as if we were hosting an important event. But I quickly realized that the dinner wasn't about me. It was about Madison. She sat across from me, her blue eyes sparkling as she looked at Nathan. She smiled, tilting her head, her long hair shining under the chandelier. I saw the way she looked at him. The look I knew better than anyone else. "Nathan, what do you do for a living?" Madison asked, her voice unusually sweet. Nathan smiled. "I'm an assistant designer at an architecture firm." "Wow, that's so interesting. I always thought people in that field were incredibly creative," Madison giggled, her slender fingers brushing the rim of her glass. I stiffened. I knew exactly what Madison was doing. I had seen it too many times before. When she wanted something, she would get it. Throughout dinner, Madison kept finding ways to draw Nathan's attention. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that Nathan loved me, that he wouldn't be affected. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. After dinner, I went into the kitchen to clean up, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling. Then I heard Madison giggling. When I turned around, I saw her standing next to Nathan, her hand lightly resting on his arm. My heart sank. "Madison, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice low enough that only she could hear. Madison shrugged, her lips curving into an innocent smile. "Relax, Lucy. We're just talking." But I knew it wasn't just talking. The next day, Nathan started texting me less, then even less. Our meetings became awkward, filled with unexplained silences. And then, on a late afternoon, as I stood in my small apartment, my heart pounding, I heard the words I had been dreading for weeks. "Lucy, I'm sorry." Nathan's voice grew quieter. "It's Madison. I think I have feelings for her." I held my breath, my entire body frozen. "You're choosing her?" I asked, my voice breaking. Nathan didn't answer right away. And that silence said everything. I looked at him one last time, then turned away. I didn't cry, not then. I slammed the door behind me and stood still in my tiny apartment. The silence was so deep I could hear my own heavy breathing. A hollow emptiness grew in my chest, as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Nathan was gone. Madison had won. I looked around. The worn-out chair, the stack of books piled on the table, the photo I had taken of the sunset at the beach last year. Everything seemed the same, but I knew that in just a few short minutes, my world had changed forever. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I wasn't even sure what I was expecting. A message from Nathan? An apology from Madison? Or just some sign that I still mattered? But there was nothing. Just a blank screen reflecting my stunned face back at me. That night, I drove home, not knowing why. Maybe I just wanted to feel some warmth, even if it was an illusion. But when I walked through the door, my mother was standing there, arms crossed, her face void of any sympathy. "Lucy, you can't keep blowing things out of proportion like this," she sighed. "Nathan made his choice. You need to learn to accept it." I clenched my fists, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. Accept it? Accept that she took the person I loved? Accept that once again I was left behind? My mother simply shook her head. "Madison didn't take anyone. If Nathan really loved you, he wouldn't have changed his mind." My chest tightened. I looked over at my father, hoping, just maybe, he would say something, anything. But as usual, he just turned the page of his newspaper, not even bothering to look up. I let out a bitter laugh. "I see. Madison has always been the important one, hasn't she?" No one answered. That night, I packed my things in silence. I didn't need much, just a suitcase of clothes, a few books, and the old camera I had bought from a thrift store back in high school. I left a note on the kitchen counter. "I'm leaving. Don't call." And as I stepped out the door, I didn't look back. I moved into a small apartment in the city, a place where no one knew who I was, where I could start over without Madison's shadow looming over me. I found a job as a waitress at a small diner. The place was always busy, the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversations, the constant rhythm of orders being called out. Strangely, I liked it. Here, I wasn't Madison's forgotten little sister. I was just Lucy, the girl who made the best coffee in the place. At night, I enrolled in business courses at a community college. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I needed knowledge to make sure I would never have to rely on anyone again. The first few months were hard. I was exhausted from long shifts, late-night classes, and eating instant noodles alone in my tiny apartment. But I also felt myself changing. I learned to take care of myself, to stand on my own without needing my family's approval. And then I found photography. One late night after work, I sat by my window, watching the streetlights reflect off the rain-soaked pavement. I picked up my camera and snapped a picture. I didn't know why I did it, but when I looked at the photo on the screen, I felt something. A little peace. A little hope. I started taking more pictures. The forgotten corners of the city, the homeless bundled up on sidewalks, the abandoned bicycles left to rust. I didn't have expensive equipment, but I had an eye for what others overlooked. One day, while I was taking photos in the park, a man approached me. He wore a slightly rumpled suit, his tie loosened, dark hair a little unkempt. "Are you a photographer?" he asked. I chuckled. "I just take pictures for fun." He looked at the image on my camera screen. "You have a unique eye." "I'm Daniel, creative director for an art magazine. I'm looking for a new photographer for a piece on urban life." My eyes widened. "You want to hire me?" Daniel nodded. "I'd like to see more of your photos first, but yes. I think you have potential." I could hardly believe my ears. I was so used to being overlooked, dismissed, but this time, someone actually saw me. That night, I sat alone in my small apartment, looking through the photos I had taken over the past few months. I remembered how it felt to hold that medal when I was 12. The feeling of hope, only to have it crushed by my family's indifference. But this time was different. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had found my own light, and I wouldn't let anyone dim it. The next day, I sent Daniel my portfolio. 3 days later, I received a response. "Amazing, when can you start?" I smiled. For the first time in my life, I knew I was on the right path. I never thought I would hear about Madison again, but then one day, Lydia called me. Lydia was my cousin, the only person in the family who had never treated me like Madison's shadow. We didn't talk often, but whenever we did, she always brought me pieces of news from the world I had left behind. "Lucy, do you have a moment?" Lydia's voice came through the phone, hesitant. I was editing a new set of photos for the magazine, but I immediately stopped. "What is it?" Lydia sighed. "It's about Madison. And Nathan." I tensed, my fingers tightening around my phone. Even after all these years, that name still had the power to pull me back into the past. "I don't care," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think you might," Lydia said cautiously. "Their marriage is falling apart. Nathan hates his job, and Madison is spending money like it grows on trees. They're drowning in debt, but still trying to keep up appearances." I let out a small laugh, not out of satisfaction, but because of the irony. "So?" I asked. Lydia was silent for a moment before she continued. "You know, everyone in the family still talks about Madison like she's the greatest person in the world. But I'm starting to see the cracks. Your mom, Aunt Linda, used to brag about her constantly, but now she's starting to talk about you." I froze. "Why?" "Because you made it," Lydia said. "And Madison didn't." Madison and Nathan had been married for less than 3 years, but their life wasn't what she had imagined. Nathan used to be an ambitious young man, but after marrying Madison, he got stuck in a dull job at a finance company. Madison, on the other hand, spent recklessly, buying luxury items, traveling, and posting pictures online to maintain her perfect image. But behind those polished photos, reality wasn't so glamorous. "Nathan is miserable," Lydia continued. "He can't stand Madison anymore. They fight all the time. Madison refuses to give up her lavish lifestyle, but Nathan is getting exhausted trying to keep up with it." I leaned back in my chair, processing what Lydia had just told me. I used to think that leaving was the only way for me to find peace, but now it seemed like Madison was falling into the very trap she had created. I didn't say anything, but Lydia kept going. "They're on the verge of splitting up, Lucy, and I don't think Madison knows how to handle it." I glanced at the photo on my computer screen, a picture of a little girl standing under a streetlight, her eyes filled with hope. Once, I had also waited for something from my family, a sign of recognition, a little love. But now, I didn't need it anymore. "All of this," I said slowly, "has nothing to do with me anymore." Lydia sighed. "I know, but I still thought you should know." I ended the call and leaned back in my chair. No matter how much I tried to leave the past behind, it always found a way to return. Things didn't end there. A few weeks later, Lydia called me again, this time with different news. "Lucy, it's about Uncle Robert." I froze. My father. The man who had always been indifferent to me, who had never truly seen me no matter how hard I tried. "He didn't make it," Lydia said, her voice as light as a breeze. A strange feeling washed over me, not sadness, not regret. Just emptiness. "Are you going to the funeral?" Lydia asked. I didn't answer right away. I knew that if I went back, I would have to face Madison, my mother, and the family that had cast me aside. But did I really need to return? That evening, I told Daniel about Lydia's call. He sat on the couch, his eyes filled with concern as he looked at me. "What do you think?" he asked. I gazed out the window, the city lights shimmering like distant stars. I don't know," I admitted. "I don't feel anything for them anymore. But maybe I need to go, to close this chapter, Daniel nodded. If you want to go, I'll go with you. For the first time in years, I returned to my old home. I walked into the funeral in a simple black dress, feeling like an outsider at an event I didn't belong to. My mother sat in the front row, her eyes red, but when she saw me, her expression quickly changed. Not relief, but hesitation. And then I saw Madison. She still looked as beautiful as ever, but something was different. She no longer radiated like the sun. Instead, it seemed like she was desperately clinging to something slipping away. I didn't think you'd come, Madison said, her voice sharp. I smirked. Well, surprise. Then I heard a familiar voice behind me. Lucy? Nathan. He looked older, his eyes weary, the confidence he once had now faded. When he saw Daniel step beside me, I saw the confusion flash across his face. How have you been? Nathan asked, his voice awkward. I simply shrugged. Good, and you? He gave a sad chuckle. I guess you've heard. It's not what I expected. I said nothing, just looked at Nathan, Madison, my mother, all the people who once made me feel invisible. But now, I was no longer that version of Lucy. I turned to my mother. You always said Madison deserved everything. So? Do you have what you wanted now? She didn't answer. I glanced at Madison one last time, then took Daniel's hand. Let's go. This time, as I walked out the door, I felt no heaviness. I had closed that chapter once and for all. I never expected a call from my mother, but then one evening, as I was editing the final photos for my exhibition, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. An unknown number. Instinct told me not to answer, but then I pressed accept. Lucy. My mother's voice came through, softer than I remembered, as if she had lost the certainty she once carried. I didn't respond right away. How many years had it been since we truly spoke? She cleared her throat, as if struggling to find the right words. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. I gripped the phone tighter. You have 1 minute, I said, my voice calm but cold. My mother sighed. Madison isn't doing well. I let out a quiet laugh, not from amusement but from the irony of it all. She had spent her entire life caring only about Madison, and now that my sister was struggling, she suddenly remembered I existed? Let me guess, I said, my eyes still fixed on the image on my screen. Nathan is fed up with the marriage, Madison has been spending too much, and now they're in financial trouble? My mother stayed silent, and I knew I was right. You don't understand, she said, her voice trembling. Nathan is thinking about leaving. He says he can't take it anymore, and Madison, she won't accept it. She still thinks everything will be fine, but it's clearly not. I crossed my arms. And what do you want me to do about it? My mother blinked, as if she couldn't believe my reaction. I just thought you would care. After all, she's still your sister. Sister? I scoffed. You say that as if Madison ever considered me a part of her life. She said nothing. I could imagine her gripping the phone, trying to convince me, as if this were some heartwarming family drama where I would suddenly soften and come running back. But that wasn't reality. Why did you really call me? I asked, my voice calmer than I expected. Because I realize I was wrong, she admitted. I know I treated you unfairly. I know I favored Madison too much. But you have to understand, I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted what was best for both of you. I let out a quiet, bitter laugh. No, you didn't want what was best for both of us. You wanted what was best for Madison, and you pretended I didn't exist. She didn't argue. I took a deep breath. You called me because Madison is struggling, not because you actually want to fix anything between us. You just don't have anyone else left to turn to. My mother took a shaky breath. Lucy? Please. I closed my eyes, keeping my emotions steady. I've already forgiven myself, I said, But I don't owe you anything. And I hung up. I didn't think much about that call afterward. I no longer felt anger or bitterness. I just felt relief. I spent the next month focusing on the most important project of my career, Unseen, my first photography book. The images in the book weren't just pictures of places or people. They were pieces of a story. The forgotten corners of the city, the people no one noticed, the hidden smiles, the unspoken sadness. They weren't just photographs. They were me. The book launch took place in a small but intimate gallery. The photos hung on the walls, illuminated by soft lighting. Daniel stood beside me, his hand firmly holding mine, a quiet reminder that I was no longer alone. As I stepped forward to speak, I felt something shift inside me. My whole life, I thought I was invisible, I said, my voice carrying through the quiet room. I thought I had to prove my worth to people who never truly cared. But I was wrong. I looked around the room, my gaze landing on Lydia, on Daniel, on the people who had supported me through this journey. I don't need their validation to be myself. And if anyone here has ever felt like they don't exist, remember, you are always worthy. Sometimes you just have to find your own light. Applause filled the room, but more important than the sound was the feeling in my heart. I had finally stepped out of Madison's shadow. No longer the forgotten little sister, no longer the girl struggling to be seen. I was simply me, and for the first time, that was enough. One late afternoon, as I was organizing photos for my next exhibition, I received a letter. A simple envelope, nothing remarkable, just my name, written in slanted handwriting I hadn't seen in years. I knew immediately that it was from my mother. I held the letter in my hands, feeling the rough texture of the paper beneath my fingers. A part of me wanted to rip it apart instantly, but another part hesitated. I was no longer the little girl who craved her approval. Quietly, I opened the envelope, my eyes scanning the words. Lucy, I know you may not want to read this, but I still want to say it whether you listen or not. I was wrong. I didn't see you. I let you become lost within our family. I thought Madison needed me more, but I never realized that you needed someone to stand beside you, too. It wasn't until you left that I understood. I lost you in a way I may never be able to fix. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I hope one day we can talk again. I placed the letter down on the table. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anger. I just felt free. How many years had I waited for this? An apology? A recognition that I wasn't invisible in my own family? But now, after finally receiving it, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Forgiveness doesn't mean returning to what once was. Forgiveness doesn't mean opening the door to the past and allowing myself to be hurt again. Sometimes, forgiveness is simply letting go. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not because I intended to respond, but because I wanted to keep it as a reminder, a testament that I had overcome everything without needing their validation. That evening, I went to my gallery, where my latest photographs were on display. Soft lighting illuminated each frame, cityscapes at dawn, unseen moments I had captured through my lens. Daniel stood beside me, his hand gently holding mine. Lydia was chatting with a group of guests, her face glowing with happiness. I walked toward a photograph displayed at the center. It was a black and white portrait of myself, taken from behind. A girl standing between two towering buildings, the light glimmering ahead while shadows still lingered behind her. A Lucy who was once forgotten, who once sought acceptance. And a Lucy who now stood free from the past. I smiled. I was whole, strong, and no longer anyone's shadow. That light ahead, it was mine. Lucy's story isn't just about betrayal or pain. It's about finding oneself. In life, we sometimes get lost in the shadows of others, overlooked, unseen. But a person's worth isn't defined by family or society's recognition. It's in their ability to rise and create their own light. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it simply means letting go and moving forward. And the most important truth of all, we are always enough, always worthy, whether others acknowledge it or not. What do you think about Lucy's journey? Do you relate to her story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family, life, and the journey to self-worth. I stood still in my small apartment, my hand gripping my phone tightly, trying to keep my voice steady even though my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my chest. You didn't need that money. My father's voice came through the speaker, casual as if he were discussing something trivial. Anyway, you're smart. I'm sure you'll figure something out. I swallowed hard, forcing down the lump in my throat. How much is left? A brief silence, then the answer that made my blood run cold. None, Amy. He sighed, his tone making it seem like I was the one causing problems. I had some debts to take care of. But don't worry. You'll manage. I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the tears threatening to spill. My college fund, the money I had painstakingly saved from scholarships, shifts at a local cafe, and the meager earnings from tutoring, was gone. How long ago did you take it all? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Well, it's been a while, he said dismissively, as if it were no big deal. You're at the best age of your life. You should be enjoying it instead of burying yourself in books. Maybe this is a sign for you to explore a new path. A new path? Did he really think I could just walk away from everything so easily? I took a deep breath, pushing down the anger rising inside me. I see. My father chuckled as if mistaking my acceptance for compliance. That's my girl, always practical, just like your old man. Listen, I have to run, meeting some friends. We'll talk later, okay? The screen went dark as he hung up. I remained frozen in place, his words echoing in my mind. What angered me the most wasn't just that he had taken my savings. It was how effortlessly he did it. So casually, without a hint of guilt, as if it were a minor decision that shouldn't bother me at all. My phone buzzed, a text from him. Don't tell your mom or grandma about this. No need to worry them. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course he didn't want them to know, just like he hadn't wanted them to know about his gambling debts, his failed business ventures, or his constant borrowing with no intention of paying back. I couldn't just stand here and do nothing. I needed to know exactly what he had done. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The moment I saw the transaction history, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Over $38,000. Everything I had worked tirelessly to save had been drained in the past 3 months. Not in one go, but through a series of small withdrawals, each just low enough to avoid triggering immediate red flags. I stared at the screen, a sharp pain in my chest. He hadn't just taken my money. He had planned this. He knew exactly what he was doing. The door to my room creaked open. Emma, my roommate, stepped in. She stopped short when she saw me sitting among scattered papers, my face pale. Her brow furrowed. Amy, are you okay? I let out a dry laugh, one laced with bitterness. My dad took all of my college money. Emma's eyes widened. What? She snatched my laptop, scanning the transactions. This is theft. You have to report him. I shook my head. I can't. He's a co-owner of the account. Legally, he had the right to access it. Emma muttered a curse under her breath. But you earned that money. You worked so hard for it. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I should have seen this coming. This isn't the first time. Emma looked at me, confused. I took a deep breath. He used to borrow my birthday money when I was a kid. Always promised to pay it back, but never did. He even tried to convince me to take out student loans in my name to help him with his debts. I don't know why I thought this time would be any different. My phone buzzed again. Don't stress over the money. Maybe this is a sign you should take a break from school. I know some people who can get you a job. You're pretty. You could model instead of wasting time on classes. A surge of fury coursed through me. I was not a tool. I was not a resource for him to exploit. I opened my laptop, fingers moving quickly across the keyboard as my mind cleared. I needed a plan. First, I had to gather evidence. I downloaded my bank statements, highlighting every suspicious withdrawal. I pulled up emails confirming my scholarships, every deposit I had made, anything that proved that money belonged to me. Next, I had to research the legal aspects. My father might have been a co-owner of the account, but was there any way to hold him accountable? I needed to understand my rights and find a way forward. I couldn't let things end like this. Then came the financial side. I couldn't let him ruin my future. I would reach out to the student support office, explore loan options, emergency aid, anything that could help me complete my final year without interruption. Finally, I had to protect what was left. I would close the old account, transfer all remaining funds to a new bank where my father had no access. If he had done this once, who was to say he wouldn't try again? Step by step, I would take back control of my life. I looked up at Emma. "I'm not letting this go easily." Emma nodded, her eyes filled with support. "I'm with you. You deserve better." I glanced out the window. London still shimmered under the streetlights. I had fallen in love with this city, dreamed of a bright future here, and I wouldn't let anyone, not even my father, take that away from me. I never thought I would be the one to expose such a painful truth about my family, but if I wanted to protect my future, I had no other choice. The next morning, I went to my university's financial aid office. The advisor looked at me with sympathy as I explained what had happened. "We'll review your case, Amy. There are emergency aid programs available for students in financial distress, but you should also consider legal options." She suggested I reach out to the Student Legal Services office to see if there was any way to hold my father accountable. I left the meeting with a list of steps to take, but most importantly, I no longer felt alone in this. Then I called my grandmother. I knew she was the one person my father couldn't manipulate. When I told her everything, she was silent for a few seconds. Then her voice dropped, filled with anger. "You did the right thing telling me. We won't let this go." 3 days later, she organized a family meeting, without my father. In her living room, my mother sat quietly on the couch, her face pale as she read the messages my father had sent me. My Aunt Lauren, my mother's sister and a lawyer, studied the printed bank statements with a serious expression. My mother looked up, her eyes filled with disbelief. "He lied to me?" Her voice trembled. "He told me you chose to drop out, that you were feeling lost and wanted to come home to figure things out." She shook her head, clenching her hands as if trying to steady herself. "I can't believe this." I let out a bitter laugh. "You always believed him, didn't you, no matter how many times he betrayed you?" My grandmother exhaled sharply, her gaze sharper than ever. "No one in this family will ever believe him again." She turned to Aunt Lauren. "What can we do?" Aunt Lauren clasped her hands together, deep in thought. "Since Amy's father was a co-owner of the account, legally he had the right to withdraw the money, but..." She tapped the papers lightly. "We can pressure him in other ways." I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Aunt Lauren gave a small smile, but there was no warmth in it. "He admitted in his messages that the money was for your education. We can send a formal letter demanding repayment. If he ignores it, we can pursue civil action, or, at the very least, make his life very difficult." I nodded. "I want to do that." My grandmother looked at me, pride shining in her eyes. "You remind me of myself when I was younger." That evening, Aunt Lauren drafted a formal letter demanding my father repay the full amount he had taken, or face legal consequences. My mother remained silent throughout the evening. But then, she looked up, her expression more determined than I had ever seen. "Lauren, can you help me with something else?" My aunt raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" My mother tightened her hands together. "I want a divorce." A heavy silence filled the room. I turned to my grandmother and saw her nod slightly. "You finally see him for who he really is." 2 days later, the letter from the lawyer reached my father. I knew this because less than an hour after he received it, I got a flood of frantic messages. "What are you doing? Family doesn't sue each other. You're ruining my reputation." I did reply. An hour later, he called. I stared at the flashing screen, then silenced it, letting it go to voicemail. Less than a minute later, he called again. Finally, I picked up. "Hello, Dad. What are you thinking, Amy?" His voice was filled with anger. "You're turning your back on your own family over a few $1,000s?" I let out a small laugh. "A few $1,000s? That was my future. I'll pay it back when I can," he said quickly. I frowned. "When?" He hesitated. "I can't promise an exact date, but..." "Then that's not good enough," I cut in. "I need a clear answer, or we'll let the courts decide." He sighed, his tone shifting to something softer. "You know I was only trying to do what's best for the family, right? You wouldn't actually sue your own father, would you?" I took a deep breath, then smiled coldly. "You're right. I won't sue you." I paused. "Aunt Lauren will do it for me." A long silence stretched between us. I could imagine his face at that moment, confused, angry, then panicked. Finally, he muttered, "You can't do this to your father." I sighed. "You did this to yourself." Then, I hung up. 3 days later, my grandmother called me. "Your father just came by." I sat up straight. "What did he say?" She chuckled lightly, but I could hear the sharpness in her tone. "He tried to convince me to talk you out of this. Said you were tearing the family apart." I shook my head. "And what did you tell him?" "I told him that you weren't the one who tore this family apart. He did that a long time ago." I leaned back into my chair, feeling a weight lift off my chest. "Thank you, Grandma." She was silent for a moment before saying, "Amy, there's something I haven't told you." I frowned. "What is it?" "Your mother went through a lot with your father. He didn't just take money from her. He controlled her in ways you can't imagine. Every time she tried to leave, he found a way to pull her back in with lies and empty promises. I warned her many times, but she still believed him." A surge of anger burned inside me. I had thought I was the only victim, but my mother had endured this for years. I believe this time, she will finally break free. And I knew that this time, I wouldn't let my father have another chance. I hadn't expected my father to change, but I also hadn't expected him to react this way. When the repayment demand letter reached him, instead of owning up to his actions or trying to make amends, my father launched his usual manipulation campaign. He called every family member, spinning an entirely different version of the story. "Ami is trying to destroy my reputation," he told Uncle James, my grandmother's brother. "She's been influenced by the wrong people. If it weren't for outsiders, she would never do this to her own family. I know Amy lost some money, but she's young. She has her whole future ahead of her. I don't," he lamented to Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister. "Does she really want her own father to be left with nothing?" He even called my grandmother, attempting to appeal to her sympathy. "Mom, I know I made mistakes, but this is a family matter. It shouldn't go to court. Can't you talk to Amy and make her drop this?" But this time, no one believed him. My grandmother responded in a calm yet firm voice. "No, Gregory. You can't fool me anymore, or your wife, or your daughter. Amy is doing the right thing, and I will always stand by her." His calls became his own downfall. Instead of turning the family against me, they only reminded everyone of what he had done in the past. One by one, people started sharing the stories they had once kept silent. Uncle James recalled the money my father had borrowed for a business investment, only to disappear without a trace. Aunt Patricia mentioned the funds he had taken from her children's education savings, promising to repay within 6 months, but never doing so. Even distant relatives began piecing together the pattern. How? My father would borrow money and then dodge any conversation about repayment. What I had gone through was only a small part of a cycle that had lasted for decades. While my father continued to isolate himself, I kept moving forward. After reviewing my case, my university agreed to grant me a special financial aid package so I could complete my final year. My advisor, Miss Matthews, even helped me find additional scholarship opportunities to make up for part of the lost funds. Additionally, my grandmother helped me secure a part-time job at a local library, a job that not only provided income, but also gave me a quiet space to focus on my studies. I once thought losing that money meant my future had collapsed, but in reality, it only made me more determined than ever. I would not let my father dictate my fate. While I was rebuilding my life, my father was losing everything. During the divorce proceedings, my mother finally found the courage to reveal the truth. She provided the lawyer with evidence of how my father had controlled her finances, the debts he had hidden while borrowing money under the guise of supporting the family, and even instances where he secretly used shared assets as collateral for personal loans. When this evidence was presented in court, the carefully maintained image of a trustworthy man that my father had upheld for years completely crumbled. He was forced to give up a larger share of assets than he had anticipated, and more importantly, he was ordered to repay the money he had taken from my college fund in installments. At first, he tried to evade this responsibility. He sent me messages filled with blame. "You're destroying me. Do you even know how much I've sacrificed for you?" I didn't reply. Then he tried another approach. "Family comes first, Amy. Do you really want to see your father backed into a corner?" I still didn't respond. Finally, he resorted to pleading. "Just this once, Amy. Give me a little more time. I'll pay you back, but don't push me too hard." I simply forwarded the message to Aunt Lauren, because by then I understood the truth. My father wasn't truly remorseful. He didn't think he had done anything wrong. He only regretted that, for the first time, someone was holding him accountable. The day he was due to make his first repayment, I received another message from him. "I won't let this end like this." I didn't care. I only looked at my bank notification, the first deposit he was legally required to make. That money couldn't undo the damage he had caused, but it was proof of something far more important. For the first time in my life, my father no longer had control over me. 3 years later, I stood on the stage at my graduation ceremony, wearing my navy blue gown, looking down at the audience where my grandmother and mother sat, clapping proudly. I had made it. Despite my father draining my college fund, despite the struggles of juggling part-time jobs and financial burdens, I had graduated on time, with honors. After the ceremony, as friends and family gathered to take photos, I checked my phone. A message from an unlisted number. But I didn't need to guess who it was. "Congratulations, my girl. I always knew you would succeed. Do you have time to call your dad?" I stared at the message for a moment, then locked my screen. My father hadn't changed. I knew he wasn't congratulating me out of pride for my achievements. He was just looking for another way back into my life, to see what he could gain from me this time. I didn't reply. 2 months later, I moved to London and started my first job as a financial analyst at a prestigious consulting firm. My apartment was small but cozy, with a large window overlooking the bustling streets. I had achieved this on my own. Not thanks to my father, not because of him, and certainly with no help from him. But it seemed he still couldn't accept that. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, Emma sent me a link. "Have you seen this?" I opened it. A public social media post from my father, accompanied by an old picture of the two of us when I was a child. I've always believed in my daughter. I did everything to help her succeed. A proud father. I set my phone down on the table, an uneasy feeling rising in my chest. He was trying to rewrite the story, trying to make people believe he was a devoted father, that my success was because of him. But this time, the difference was, no one believed him anymore. Underneath the post, relatives and acquaintances left skeptical comments. "So you helped her by taking her entire college fund?" Aunt Patricia wrote. "What an amazing father. Who would have thought?" Another relative mocked. My father tried to control the narrative, but this time he couldn't. The final payment arrived quietly. I received a bank notification. The last installment of my father's debt had been deposited into my account. I wasn't expecting an apology, but I did receive a letter. I opened it, immediately recognizing his familiar handwriting. I know I've made a lot of mistakes, but family is family. I don't want things to end this way. You've made it, you're successful. Can you forgive me? Maybe we can go back to how things were. We can start over. I folded the letter and placed it on the table. Forgiveness was not the issue. I was no longer angry. I was no longer hurt. I had everything I needed to move forward. But starting over had never been an option. I had seen him for who he truly was, and I no longer needed someone like that in my life. A few months later, my grandmother visited me in London. We sat in a small cafe near my office, sipping hot tea on a chilly afternoon. She looked at me and smiled. "You did it, Amy. You stood on your own." I smiled back, feeling lighter than ever. "I don't think he ever truly regretted anything," I said, gazing out the window. "He just regrets that he can't control me anymore." She nodded. "And that is the greatest punishment for him?" I took a sip of tea, feeling its warmth spread through me. My life was now mine alone. No more manipulation, no more exploitation. I had stepped out of my father's shadow, and I would never go back. Amy's story is not just about a father's betrayal, but about reclaiming control over her own life. Sometimes, the very people who should protect us become our biggest obstacles. But instead of breaking, Amy used that betrayal as fuel to rise above it. Her success wasn't just financial independence, it was escaping the cycle of manipulation and reclaiming her voice. In life, sometimes the best thing we can do is move forward without looking back. What do you think about Amy's story? Have you ever faced a similar situation in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about life, family, and the lessons that shape us.